"You're just dead weight." That's what he said. Not in a fight. Not in anger. Just plainly, like he was stating a fact. Like I was a box too heavy to carry and not worth the strain. That was the exact moment the woman I used to be died. My name is Amara. And before I became the CEO he now reports to, I was the girlfriend he overlooked. The woman he loved when it was convenient. The one who sacrificed her dreams so he could chase his. Jaden and I met in our final year of university. He was magnetic, the kind of guy who walked into a room and made everyone turn. Ambitious, charming, confident, he had plans for his life. Big ones. And he made me feel like I was part of them. I was drawn to him not just for who he was, but for who he made me believe I could be. We studied together, stayed up late talking about the future, and when he told me he wanted to build something meaningful with me, I believed him. We moved in together after graduation. While he pursued internships and networked at business events, I worked 2 part-time jobs to keep us afloat. I cooked, I cleaned, I believed in him when no one else did. I even gave up a full-time job offer of my own because he said he needed me closer to home, to help manage things while he focused on making it. I told myself love was about sacrifice. About support. That my time would come. It didn't. Jaden got a job at Stratex, one of the fastest-growing marketing firms in the city. At first it was exciting. He'd come home buzzing with ideas, practicing presentations with me in our tiny living room. I'd help him edit proposals, draft speeches, rehearse client pitches. I was his silent partner, the invisible architect behind his rise. Then the promotion started. First to lead strategist, then senior brand executive. With each new title he became more distant. He stopped asking for my input. He'd come home late, never bring up my day, never ask how I was doing. If I brought up starting my own design studio, he'd change the subject or laugh it off like it was a cute hobby, not a serious goal. Till I stayed. Because that's what I was taught. Be the woman behind the man. Be patient. Be loyal. Be his peace. Until the night that broke me. It was our anniversary. I spent the whole day cooking, decorating our place with candles and flowers, trying to remind him of who we used to be. He walked in 2 hours late, suit jacket slung over his shoulder, eyes glued to his phone. When he finally looked up, he sighed. "You didn't have to do all this," he muttered, already loosening his tie. My heart sank. "Do you even remember what today is?" He sat down, checked his watch. "Amara, I'm exhausted. Can we not do this tonight?" "Do what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Celebrate the relationship I gave everything to?" That's when he said it. He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. Just tired. Annoyed. "I'm carrying the weight of everything. This house, my career, our future. Sometimes it feels like you're just dead weight." The room fell silent. I stood there frozen, staring at the man I thought would be my forever. And all I could think was, this is how people break. Not with a scream, but with a sentence. Deadweight. Like I was nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't cry, not then. The next morning while he showered, I packed a single suitcase. I left the key on the kitchen counter with a note that read, "You dropped me thinking I'd fall. But deadweight doesn't sink, it rises." I walked out with nothing but that suitcase and the fire in my chest. That was the last day I ever let someone decide my worth. And the first day of the life I was about to build. Starting over sounds poetic in movies. In real life, it's a storm. After I left Jaden, I moved into a tiny studio apartment on the edge of the city. No job. No savings. No plan. Just one suitcase, a bruised heart, and a head full of ideas I was too afraid to chase before. The silence of that new place was loud. But for the first time in years it was mine. I cried the first night. Not for him. But for the version of me that stayed so long. For the girl who begged to be seen by a man too busy building himself to notice he was standing on her. I gave myself one night to grieve. Then I got to work. I dusted off the designs I used to sketch at night while Jaden slept. Logos, campaign ideas, color theory charts. Things I used to hide because he called them distractions. I spent my mornings applying for freelance gigs and my nights teaching myself how to build a portfolio. I learned branding, copywriting, digital marketing, everything I used to help him with now for me. And slowly it started to pay off. A small bakery hired me to redesign their logo and run a social media campaign. I poured everything I had into it. The result? Their customer base doubled in 3 weeks. Word spread. 1 client turned into 3. 3 turned into 7. I built a website. Created a name. Arise Creative Studio. Because that's exactly what I was doing. Arising. I didn't have fancy equipment. Just a second-hand laptop and passion. No agency backing me. Just the fire from every time someone called me not enough. One evening about 6 months in, I got an email that made my hands shake. StraightX was hiring a brand consultant for a rebranding project. Yes, that's StraightX. Jaden's company. The irony was wild. And tempting. I almost closed the tab. But then I remembered all the nights I sat across from Jaden, helping him pitch to clients who never even knew I existed. I remembered the way he introduced me to his colleagues. She's just helping out with admin stuff. I was never just helping. I was building. So I applied. 2 days later I got the interview. I walked into the glass tower of StraightX in a black suit I bought with my first 3 client checks. Head held high. Eyes steady. No makeup to cover my scars. Just confidence I had earned. The woman who interviewed me was sharp, all business. But as I spoke, explaining my process, my client success stories, my vision, her face softened. "You've done all this on your own?" she asked. I nodded. After someone told me I was deadweight, I decided to build wings. She smiled. The next day I got the call. I had the contract. Not just as a consultant. As lead. My job? To revamp the company's identity from the inside out. The team I'd be working with? Jaden was on it. The first time I saw him again was during a virtual meeting. He didn't recognize the name at first. Not until I turned on my camera. His face drained of color like he'd seen a ghost. I smiled politely. "Hi Jaden. I'll be leading this project." He blinked. Stuttered. "Amara." I didn't blink. "Yes. Thank you for logging in. Let's begin." From that moment on, everything changed. Suddenly, the woman he dismissed was the one calling the shots. The one reviewing his proposals. Approving or rejecting his pitches. I could see it in his face every time he tried to assert himself. He was losing control. But I didn't come to gloat. I came to lead. And I did. With precision. With grace. With the kind of silent authority that doesn't need validation to be felt. Week by week, my strategies started working. Campaigns went viral. Clients returned. Revenue increased. And upper management started paying attention to me more than anyone else in the room, including Jaden. At the end of the 3rd quarter, the CEO called me in for a private meeting. He offered me a permanent executive role. Head of strategy. The job Jaden once dreamed of. I didn't accept. Yet. Because I knew I hadn't finished what I came to do. And karma was still brewing. If you've ever been underestimated, then you know the silence that follows your success is louder than any insult you've ever heard. Jaden had always been the voice in every room. The one who spoke the most, interrupted the fastest, and claimed credit with a smile. But now he sat at the far end of conference tables, quiet, scribbling notes no one asked for. It was strange watching him like that. The man who once dismissed my ideas as cute, now had to watch those very ideas generate real results. Under my name, not his. And I never once looked in his direction unless it was to correct his numbers. Let me be clear. I wasn't out for blood. I didn't want to ruin him. But I wanted him to see what he threw away when he thought I had nothing to offer. I wanted him to feel the weight of every "you're not enough" he'd ever flung at me. Not through revenge, but through the undeniable proof of my value. It happened gradually, like a slow leak in a polished boat. The company's VPs started coming directly to me instead of through him. The interns started whispering about my presentations, not his. The CEO began inviting me to closed-door strategy talks, leaving Jaden off the calendar completely. And still I remained professional. Cool. Unbothered. Because while he was losing control, I was building momentum. The biggest moment came 2 months into the project. We were prepping for a major client pitch, one that could land StraightX a 7-figure account. Jaden insisted on leading it. He'd prepared the presentation, rehearsed the talking points. But I knew it was weak. I'd seen his slides. I'd heard the rehearsals. And they weren't good enough. The day of the pitch, we stood outside the boardroom. I looked at him, calm, composed but firm. "Step aside," I said. He blinked. "Excuse me. You're not leading this pitch," I said. "I am." He scoffed. "You think you can handle this client better than I can?" "I don't think," I replied, pushing open the door. "I know." He didn't follow me in. He couldn't. Because I didn't leave the door open behind me. The pitch. It was flawless. We closed the deal. And I walked out of that room knowing something had shifted. Not just in the company. In me. I wasn't hiding behind anyone anymore. That night I went home and cried, but not from sadness. From freedom. Because I had finally stopped shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. Jaden didn't show up to work for 3 days after that. When he returned, his tone was different. Quieter. Measured. He stopped challenging my decisions. Stopped throwing in smug comments during meetings. Instead, he sat with his head down, scribbling endlessly into a notebook no one cared to read. I should have felt bad for him. But all I could think about were the nights I stayed up drafting his presentations while he slept soundly. The times I held his hand through career slumps while he rolled his eyes at my dreams. The way he laughed when I told him I wanted to start something of my own. "You wouldn't last a week," he said once. Now I was the one giving feedback on his performance. The same man who called me deadweight now sat waiting for my approval. Oh, how the tides had turned. But this story wasn't just about him. It was about every woman who ever stayed silent when someone belittled her. Every woman who dimmed her own light to keep a man comfortable. I wasn't silent anymore. And my light, it was just getting started. You know what no one tells you about rising? It's lonely. Not because you're alone, but because the people who used to clap the loudest suddenly go quiet. And the man who once claimed to love you, he can't look you in the eye without seeing everything he lost. Jaden started avoiding me after that pitch. He'd shuffle into meetings late, speak only when asked, and leave before anyone else. If our eyes met, he looked away. Once I walked past him in the hallway and I heard him whisper under his breath, "It should have been me." But it wasn't. Because when it was his turn, he called me a burden. And now, the same boardroom that once echoed with his voice now rang with mine. My ideas, my leadership, my clarity, they drove results. I turned the company's most struggling product line into its top performer in 8 weeks. I revived a dying brand strategy they'd shelved for years. Suddenly, I wasn't just part of the team, I was the team. People noticed. I was invited to a national Women in Tech conference as a keynote speaker. My name was listed beside CEOs I used to watch on LinkedIn from my couch, dreaming. My inbox overflowed with invitations, offers, articles asking for my insight. And yet I kept showing up. Not just because I had something to prove, but because there were women watching me. Watching to see if someone like them, quiet, overlooked, pushed aside, could actually rise. At the next company town hall, I stood on stage to present the quarterly success report. Jaden sat in the crowd, barely blinking as slide after slide displayed numbers tied directly to my work. I caught his expression, tight-lipped, jaw clenched, eyes dull. He had nothing to say. Afterward, he approached me near the elevators. His voice low, almost unrecognizable. "You did good," he said. I turned, looked him dead in the eye. "I was always good. You just weren't looking." He flinched. He opened his mouth to respond, but the elevator arrived. I stepped in and let the doors close between us. And that was the last real conversation we ever had. A week later, he submitted a request to transfer out of the division. He couldn't take it anymore. Watching me thrive in the same space he once told me I didn't belong in. Watching everyone turn to me for answers he used to pretend only he had. But the story didn't end there. Success has a way of opening doors and exposing secrets. A journalist reached out to me asking for a quote about women in leadership and resilience after setbacks. I agreed. The article was published under the headline, "Deadweight No More, the woman who took the reins and changed the game." They quoted me directly, "I used to believe someone had to give me permission to lead. I don't believe that anymore." The piece went viral. Within hours, my LinkedIn was flooded with thousands of messages. from women especially sharing their own stories, their own Jadens. And I got a call from the company's board. They wanted to know if I'd consider coming on as a permanent executive. Not just a consultant. Not just a strategist. They wanted me in the C-suite. My answer? I didn't say yes right away. Because I needed to make sure that I wasn't chasing validation. I wasn't. I was chasing purpose. And once I realized that, I accepted. The first time I walked into the executive wing as chief strategy officer, I passed Jaden's old office. His nameplate gone. And for a brief second I thought about everything I had sacrificed. Every tear. Every insult. Every moment I believed I wasn't good enough. And I smiled. Not because I'd beaten him, but because I'd finally chosen myself. When you rise, people will try to rewrite the story. Some said I was lucky. Some whispered that I must have had help, connections, favors. Not many wanted to admit that I'd built every inch of this success on the very bones of their doubt. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. My calendar filled with keynote requests. I was invited to consult for companies 10 times bigger than Stratex. I was flying to New York, London, Dubai, meeting with global leaders who valued my vision. But I never stopped thinking about how it all began. Jaden's voice still echoed sometimes. You're dragging me down. Now it only fueled me. 3 months into my executive role, I launched a new initiative, Elevate Her. A mentorship program inside Stratex designed to identify, train, and promote women across every department, especially those stuck under managers like Jaden. Applications flooded in. I spent time with every woman who joined, listening to their stories, reminding them that their voice didn't need permission to be powerful. One afternoon, a young analyst shared something that stopped me cold. He used to make me cry in meetings, she said. Jaden. He said I should speak less and watch more if I wanted to survive corporate. I stared at her, jaw tight. She wasn't bitter. Just resigned. I smiled gently. What do you do now? She lifted her chin. I lead the regional marketing team. Because you promoted me. That was the kind of revenge I lived for. Not the petty kind. Not the screaming kind. But the kind that put a woman like her in power. The kind that made men like Jaden irrelevant. And while I moved forward, he kept trying to catch up. A year after he left Stratex, he reached out to me through LinkedIn. His profile now listed him as CEO of a disruptive branding startup. But I knew the truth, he'd burned too many bridges. The industry remembered him for his arrogance and his failure to adapt. His message was short. Hey, would love to reconnect. I think we could build something powerful together. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I hit delete. Because if he didn't recognize power when it sat across from him in the boardroom, he didn't deserve to benefit from it now. That same week, I was invited to speak on a panel titled, From Undervalued to Unstoppable, Women Who Changed the Narrative. One of the panelists was a former Fortune 100 CEO. Another was a tech investor who'd turned down a $1 billion buyout because her company was her legacy. I sat beside them not as a shadow but as an equal. And when it was my turn to speak, I didn't talk about Jaden. I talked about the thousands of women like me who were told they were too much, or not enough, or hard to manage, or unqualified. I said, let them say all of it. And then let your results say more. After the panel, a woman stopped me outside the venue. She was maybe 50, dressed modestly, tears in her eyes. I stayed in a toxic job for 15 years, she said, because I didn't think I had options. But tonight, I'm going home to write my resignation. Thank you for giving me permission. I hugged her hard. Not because I'd given her power, but because she'd finally reclaimed it. That night, as I returned to my penthouse overlooking the skyline, I stood by the window, thinking about the version of me who used to stare out apartment blinds wondering if she'd ever matter. He mattered now. But not because of the title. Not because of the paychecks or articles or applause. Because she never stopped. Jaden used to say I was predictable. Small. Safe. But he was wrong. I wasn't a footnote in someone else's success story. I was the author now. And my next chapter was already being written. It happened 2 years later. Quietly, without warning. I was at a private leadership retreat in Aspen. Think tanks, panels, CEOs of Fortune 500s, hedge fund founders, unicorn startup creators, all gathered to talk strategy and legacy. It was invite only. No press. No assistants. Just minds that had built empires and were ready to build more. During one of the smaller breakout dinners, a woman beside me leaned over and whispered, "Is that your ex over there?" I turned, and there he was. Jaden. Seated at the far end of the room in a dark suit that didn't quite fit his frame like it used to. His hair was a little thinner, his posture stiff, his smile brittle. He wasn't part of the main circle. Not anymore. I later learned he'd been invited by a consultant, someone trying to do him a favor. He wasn't there as a speaker. He was there as an observer. And when our eyes met across the candlelit table, something shifted. I expected anger. What I felt was peace. After the dinner, I was invited to a smaller private negotiation, one that would potentially involve backing a new media tech venture. The founder asked me to bring someone I trusted with brand growth. I chose Celia, the woman Jaden once mocked for over-explaining in meetings. When she walked into the room, Jaden saw her before he saw me. He did a double take. She nodded politely, then took her seat at the head of the table, right beside me. Jaden lingered by the doorway as if waiting for an invitation. But there wasn't one. Not this time. That meeting closed with Celia and I securing the deal. The investor said he'd never seen a more cohesive, forward-thinking strategy. We walked out of that room not just as survivors, but as builders. Later that evening I received a message. From Jaden. "I didn't realize how far you'd come. You're everywhere now. Congrats." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's showing up in rooms you were once shut out of, owning them with quiet certainty. Sometimes it's being everything they said you'd never be, and watching them realize they were wrong too late. And sometimes it's choosing not to look back. Not out of spite, but because you've finally arrived where you were always meant to be. As I sat on the plane the next morning, champagne in hand, sun rising above the clouds, I opened my notes app and typed a single sentence. Deadweight doesn't rise, but I did. So to every woman who's been counted out, called too soft, too slow, too much, let this be your reminder. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to beg to be seen. Your existence is enough. Your growth is your proof. Your success is the only closure you need. Because one day they'll see your face and realize they lost the very thing they never understood how to hold. Like, comment, share, and subscribe if you believe in second chances and silent revenge. Your story is still being written, and you hold the pen.